Hey guys, welcome back to another Weird Wednesday. I'm Ashers, and this is.
Hello.
And also,
Terry Mixon. Heidi ho, neighbors.
oh my gosh, we have another guest. It's been a long time since we've had a guest here, Pato. What do you think about that?
Hey, Terry. Well, I know Terry from our my Thursday night stream. Welcome to the Grindhouse. Terry is one of my fellow gamers, and I kind of telegraphed his arrival a few weeks back when I mentioned how we were talking about the Flat Earth documentary on the show, and found out. And Terry, who is someone that I had done about 3 episodes with at that point, I knew him as a science fiction author and gamer. What I did not know was that he was an ex-NASA employee as well. And I thought that he would make a perfect guest on this podcast. So
I'm actually a NASA mole.
That's exciting.
That is my dream job, is to be a CIA mole or a handler.
It is actually. It talks about it a lot on the show.
I would love that. I wish I was in better shape so that if I had to, like, I don't know. I'm sure there's some kind of physical requirement that I would fail horribly. But yeah, if I could re-roll my character, if you will, Terry, I would definitely have gone into espionage and stuff like that. I think that's absolutely fascinating.
It's not too late, man. Late life career changes are the vogue. You can do it.
Hey, listen, it's hard to co-host a show with somebody who would fucking sell me out for a decent
paycheck. Dude, and I've already established through, you talk about yourself being a podcaster of 15 years. I've been doing it for a hell of a long time too. And if there's one thing that I've gone on record and proven time and time again, is I got a big fucking mouth. So I am the last person that you
want. That is absolutely going to serve you in good stead with the CIA, my friend.
I am the last person. Now, if you want me to spread disinformation, if you want to feed me fake bullshit just to watch how far I can spread it, that's probably a really good job for me. But yeah, don't tell me stuff that other people can't know, because I'll get drunk and
so
fucking.
Basically, what you're telling us is you want to be the CIA straight man.
Right. I'd be good in a psyop, or I don't know what the lingo. I mean, I know you've spent some.
The spies do their things, and they just feed you information that you think is one thing and it's totally different, and they count on you just passing it off as fact.
Sure. No, that would be a good.
Yep.
That would be a good role for me.
Anyway, so it's actually Terry, you caught us at a weird time. We weren't here last week, which doesn't happen unless the world is.
There should
melting.
be a theory about why that happened.
It was we were in solidarity with the Writers Guild strike.
Yeah, that's what happened. That's totally what it was. No, I'm not even going to get into it. I'm sick to death of talking about it. Listen, if you listen to the show, you already know. If you follow me on social media, you already know. I had all my teeth removed. I now have dentures. End of story. I'm going to move on with my life now. Pato, what have you been up to since? Have you done anything exciting? I haven't really talked to you even outside of the show much.
Well, I checked in on you. I texted you a little bit.
Yeah.
What was going on? I don't know. Not a whole lot. I went out drinking last night with my friend Kristen, who's a fan of the show. She was a big fan of our Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Poole episode. And
you keep calling him Otis Poole. It's Otis Toole.
Whatever. All right. And
it's okay.
And so we talked about that, and it was good to go out and close the bar out. We stayed out till like 2 a.m. So I slept until like 1 p.m. today. But yeah, that was it. Spent the weekend backlogging episodes of Y2K movies for the month of June, because we have conventions over the next 3 weekends.
Oh, yeah.
So this is one less thing that I have on my plate. Next weekend, Monster Fest, Small Town Monsters presents Monsters Fest, June 3rd in beautiful downtown Canton, Ohio at the Doubletree Hilton. Kids under 12 get in free. We'll be there selling books and t-shirts and stickers. Aaron Dees will be there, Jeremiah Byron, Lyle Blackburn and his amazing hot sauce, and a whole host of others.
Kinsey's boss won't be there.
No, I saw that. Dude, after we dropped his name on this, it was like a day later that he backed out of that shit. So it's all right, bro. I wasn't trying to spook you.
Yeah, tons of great people though. Definitely, you guys should come out and come see everybody. And I mean, even just the vendors. Hey, go buy some shit that you don't need. I mean, hey. And then I'm sure you got something written up for Withville.
I didn't, because I was going to do one hurdle at a time. But yes, Withville is the following weekend, June 10th. That's going to be a load of fun. For that one, we should have the Gamera Sex Cult t-shirts in. So fingers crossed about that. And that's going to be a good time. The Blue Room Insight guys are going to be out at that one. We're already putting together a shopping list of contraband to bring with. So that's going to be a really good time. And I just noticed that Jeff Craig from Maps in Black, he's going to be at that one again. So we're going to
He's
get
at Monster Fest too, I believe.
Yeah. But with Phil, I didn't know how many carryovers from the original one were going to be there, because it is kind of
Gotcha.
a hike, you know what I mean? But
Yeah, it's a little out of the way for the usual crowd.
yeah, but it's cool. He'll be there. So we're getting the band back together in Virginia, June 10th. That'll be a lot of fun. And then
Yes.
there's the Chicago one, which still is tentative. We'll see. we have the table, and if I have the wherewithal to pack up our shit and drag it 15 minutes to this thing, I will. But I don't know. I will see. Which is one thing at a time. I try to compartmentalize my shit, and I'm not even gonna start worrying about that until we get through Monster Fest. So want to pimp that. Video game wise, I just beat High on Life, which I want to talk about for a hot second. It's a first person shooter from Justin Roiland, who did Rick and Morty, and it was a lot of fun. It was free on like the Xbox streaming service, where you get like, access to like all these games. So I spent a couple weeks playing that. It was really good, very funny. If you like Rick and Morty and you like first person shooters, this is a very good cross section of the two. All the guns, you have like 5 different guns, and they all have different personalities, and they're voiced by different actors, and the dialogue is really funny. So beat that last week, and then I started on Dredge, which is this like smaller Lovecraftian open world fishing game. Like, you have a fishing boat and you go out and you fish, but there's like Lovecraft shit in the water sometimes, and it's very interesting. It's like a nice little sorbet, because later on in June, the Grey Hill incident drops, which is something I'm very excited about. That's the alien abduction first-person shooter. So I know this sounds like I'm really into first-person shooters, which I'm not. It's not my favorite genre. RPGs are, but I like interesting takes on the first-person shooter genre. So yeah, those are all worth checking out. And then that brings me back to tabletop gaming. Just found out this week, Friday, October 20th in Madison, Wisconsin, my Dungeons & Dragons Home Alone mashup, The Tomb of Kevin McAllister, has been approved for Gamehole. So if you're a fan of me and Terry's Thursday night streams, you know that some of us have been doing the Gygax 75 challenge, and I kind of used that as the catalyst to start working on this module. The convention is 5 months away, and I'm about 80% complete with it, which is very good considering where I was at with GaryCon and the Ninja Turtles thing. So probably when we get back at the end of June into July, I'll start play testing that here in Chicago. So if you're one of our local listeners that likes to play D&D with me, hit me up and we'll get together and we'll do the Tomb of Kevin McAllister. So that is all that I have. Ashers, how was your weekend?
Uneventful. I haven't done anything. I've been doing the thing of, taking care of myself. So, yeah, not much. So initially I was like, oh, great. I've got all this spare time. And if you guys know me, and I think you do, you know that I have no idea what to do in my spare time because I don't ever have any. Right.
Right.
So I'm like, great. I can play all these video games. I can watch all these movies, all these shows, all this shit that people tell me to consume all the time. Instead, I sat on the couch with my daughter because she wouldn't leave my side, and we watched way too much Markiplier. I don't know if you're familiar with Markiplier. He plays video games on YouTube. So instead of me actually playing video games, I watched another person from Ohio play video games.
Oh my
at
God.
that, so.
You couldn't
So
go to
that
his
was,
house and just sit on his couch with him and do it? I mean, like, if he's that close.
I wish. Yeah, no, it didn't. It doesn't. I don't know the man personally.
Right.
He's a very famous YouTuber, and
Well, you will be too soon enough.
I will. Yeah, that's true. That's true. And then me and Markiplier, mark my words, we would get together and play something together. But that's it, really. I haven't. Like I said, I haven't really done much of anything else. And
Did they give you
that's
drugs?
fine. Yeah, I didn't take any of them.
You still have them?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, a
Monster
20 script
Fest.
of Vicodin. So
Monster
if you
Fest June
are,
3rd at the merch table.
if you would like to purchase some drugs, let me
Sold.
just go ahead and incriminate myself now.
Fucking sold.
Um, but we can't be doing drug deals on the show,
Well,
Bean. Come on.
I'm not what in front of the Terry's cool. I'm gonna tell nobody.
I'm making notes for the CIA right now.
He said CIA, not DEA. It's all good.
Yeah. It's well, we got a
Oh,
buddy
you
at the
say
CIA.
it's
It's
good.
fine.
Wait until they call you and start blackmailing you with this information. You do this for us, or we're going to tell the DEA.
Oh God. See what you started, Pato.
See what you got me
God
into?
damn it.
I told you don't bring up pills.
Anyway, yeah, I had 24 teeth removed and I had not 1 ounce of pain. I don't know. I think I might be Jesus. I'm not sure what happened.
You know, my stepson had all of his teeth removed, so I have some secondhand experience with seeing somebody go through that. Let me say, he had some pain.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. A lot of people, I was worried because I'm in like a bunch of these like support groups on Facebook for dentures. But a lot of these people have like black eyes and shit. I mean, they look terrible. I had no pain. I had no swelling. I was virtually fine. It's just that I haven't eaten anything in 11 days, and I don't think I'll ever eat anything ever again in my life. My mouth just doesn't understand how to be used anymore. So there's that.
I'm just gonna have to retrain it from the throat up.
Start somewhere,
After my open heart surgery, I did not eat for a long time. Not eat normally, right? Like I would have like a rice cake in the morning, and then people were always dropping off food and shit at the house, and like I would have like a spoonful of pasta, and it was great. I lost so much fucking weight, and I didn't have the stomach for it. Like I like to drink LaCroix, and like that is it was like too carbonated for me. Like I couldn't even drink that. And eventually like your stomach does change, and fast food would make me like super ill. Like if we got Burger King or something and I would try to eat like a burger, like processed meat like that, like I'd get the worst cramps, and eventually that all went away.
You know what? You went a totally different direction with that than what I thought you were going to do. I thought you were going to say you had heart surgery and then became a vegan.
No, maybe I should have. I don't know. I like cheese too much. I could definitely be a vegetarian. I actually was a vegetarian for a while, and I was fine with it. I ate a lot of veggie burritos. It was totally cool. But
so you are vegan adjacent.
What is it like? Yes. Well,
you're a vegan ally. Is that what it is?
No, what is it? Something with the ovum. There's a name for it, but it's like
an omnivore.
No. I don't know. I don't want to get derailed here, but like, yeah, I could give up red meat and shit. That would not be a problem for me. I could even give up chicken and stuff, but I like cheese too much.
I'm typically actually a pescatarian. I'm not right now because I'll just take what I can get, and mostly that's stock and thin soups and water. But usually that is just because I don't like red meats. I'm just not a fan of them. I don't like chicken. It's not because I'm sticking it to the man or anything. It's just my preference.
Well, so. I had tried to get a film launched. We had run a Kickstarter campaign for it successfully. The film never got made, but it was called The Jungle 2099. And it was a film where it was going to be a horror movie where human beings are subjected to the same exact processes that we subject animals to in our factory farming industry, right? So you saw humans in battery cages, you saw humans in forced breeding, you saw all kinds of crazy shit. And I thought that this movie would be really popular amongst the vegan crowd, and that was kind of who I was trying to capitalize on a little bit. And I didn't feel that it was it was too much of a I couldn't try to make this movie and then sit there and eat fucking steak tacos all the time, right? So I did change my diet during the pre-production of the movie, and then when the whole thing fell apart, I just went back to eating meat again. But yeah, it was a good
story. Sounds like you learned your lesson.
That's what you are.
No, I'm just incredibly weak. Terrible resolve.
We all have our
terrible resolve.
We all have our faults here. It's fine. Anyway, so like I said, it's been 2 weeks. We've been out for a minute. How about we talk about some news? What the hell's been happening around the weird world? Should I start?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let me pull this up here. Interesting to have somebody like Terry here. I don't know if he has an opinion on this or not, but we're going to talk about it. So this guy, Gary Nolan, we've talked about him before on the show. Gary Nolan is a Stanford professor of pathology. And, he's the guy that claims to have been tasked by the U.S. government to study the, oh my gosh, what's it called? The white matter disease that allegedly happens to pilots that encounter, well, what the government calls UAPs. Okay. So apparently pilots encounter these UAPs and they end up getting really sick. And, he has been tasked with, checking out those brain scans and kind of what that, entails. Anyway, so Gary attended a conference, not a conference like Monster Fest. This was like some type of medical conference or something.
Something a little bit more legit. We were not vendors at it.
Yeah, we weren't there. We weren't invited. Maybe next year they should invite us. I'll speak. And Gary stands up in front of all these people and starts talking about his belief in alien life, and went on record saying that he believes that there are alien species and that they are surveying humankind using drones and advanced forms of AI. And he also said that he's got basically insider information that he's been told by physicists that they have some of these technologies and that the government has a program where they attempt to reverse engineer these things. So that's interesting. Here's my view on it. I'd like to deep dive this guy a little bit more. I did check up on it. He is a professor at Stanford of pathology, and it makes sense why he would be on this kind of task force. Okay. But what happens with these people? We need more people like this, right? We need people with pieces of paper saying that they are credible, which sucks, but it's true. We need them.
Mhm.
And, but kind of what happens with some of these people is that they start talking and make themselves known. And then we realize that they're fucking crazy. And I'm worried that this guy might be one of them. I don't know.
Was there a connection with his original report about the brain matter being altered by UAP witnesses? Did that have something to do with Havana syndrome too?
It did.
Okay, because
we
that's
talked about that.
that's where I remember this was when we were doing the
Yeah.
Havana syndrome episode, which we identified as being bullshit. So I don't know.
Well, right. And, one of the things Gary Nolan had talked about, and I'm not going to deep dive too far into it right now, but one thing that he pushes out is the wow signal. And what he says happens to people is that the wow signal happens all the fucking time on our planet, and it just affects select individuals, and that's like a type of alien technology. And so it's like, well, yeah, but we pretty much now believe that the wow signal is just a bunch of comments. So, but then again, I don't know, maybe they're just telling us what we want to hear, whoever they are. I don't know. Like I said, I have a feeling that this guy's going to end up being batshit crazy. I don't know. Terry, are you familiar with this at all? Or is this just a foreign language?
I have heard a little bit of what you're talking about because I do pay attention to the news. I do listen to that kind of stuff. And while I don't know anything specific about what he's saying, I'm going to go ahead of here and say that I believe that there is alien life. Whether or not they're visiting here, that's questionable. I haven't seen any proof one way or the other that convinces me. But I heard a couple of facts recently that I thought were interesting, and that until about 100 and some odd years ago, UFOs were not a thing. It was angel sightings is what it was. And then there was a sudden turnover to UFOs. But when you start looking at the UFO sightings, something like 80% of them are in the United States. Virtually all UFO sightings are in the United States. And I think that's kind of peculiar.
Well, you could say reported UFO sightings from the United States. You know what I mean? When you're talking about, a less developed country, and I'm not going to open up this fucking can of worms again, but like maybe some countries don't have the reporting agencies, or they don't have people that, you know what I mean? There's no MUFON in Belarus or whatever,
Nope. He
or
went out
you're
again.
not going to have what?
You're back.
What happened?
You left for a second, but you're back
You
now.
blipped for a bit. You're back.
All right, cool. No, I was just going to say maybe some of these smaller countries don't have MUFON. They don't have the reporting agencies. These people aren't hopping on the internet and trying to figure out who to send their story to.
Why not the European Union? Why aren't there like a ton of UFO sightings in the European Union? There's a lot of people there.
Yeah.
They're very technologically advanced.
Well, there are. So one of the most famous photographs that just allegedly came out recently, but had been talked about for a very long time, comes from the UK. So there are reports. I personally, but I think is that we as Americans have a very small scope in general, and we only strictly focus on America, and so we don't really dabble in the details of what's happening elsewhere. And I don't remember if we kind of talked about that during the Virginia UFO incident.
Oh yeah.
Or what, because we kind of we always get off topic. But there are big things that happen in different areas. The chupacabra comes from UFO sightings that people think that's an alien. So it does happen. I just feel like, I don't know. I don't know if there's an actual database of how this all has happened, because even some of the databases that I follow, it's just the US. It's not anywhere else. They don't collect information for other countries, but like the UK does have their own version of MUFON, and they do have reports. Europe has a lot more UFO sightings. Cryptozoology is very almost unheard of over in those areas, but that makes sense because Europe was basically, all the forestry there has been leveled to the ground and made back up again from man. There's nothing natural that occurs there anymore. And then, of course, who knows what the fuck happens in Africa? People say they go there all the time and see dinosaurs and shit. I don't know. So I don't. I think it just depends on what your scope is for studying high strangeness. And I think if you're in the U.S., you're gonna pay attention to U.S. happenings more so than what's going. I know as a researcher, that's what I do. I only really investigate stuff that I can get to.
Yeah, but I will second something that Terry said is that we have had throughout mankind's history brushes with the unknown, and we do tend to frame them in wherever our culture's at the time, right? When we were a pre-science, pre-space exploration race, yeah, it was more religion based. It was more supernatural, right? And now that we are, trying to go to outer space, then everything was they're from Mars. It's from a different planet. It's a spaceship, right? And now that we're moving kind of even past that, people are more likely to say that, they're not actually extraterrestrial. They're transdimensional or something, right? They're not flying here from a planet with a name. They're popping through rifts in reality or the multiverse or whatever. Our explanations for these things tend to be based around wherever we're at scientifically at the time. So, I mean, you could just see that within the past 40 years, right? And that is curious in and of itself, because does that mean that maybe it's different things are visiting us, or maybe are we framing it that way? Are they framing themselves to us in that way? I don't know. It's a head scratcher. Something we might not never know the answer to for a very good reason.
Well, I'm just bringing up this Gary Nolan guy because, like I said, I think he's full of shit and he's crazy. But he's on my radar now, and we've talked about him before. So, I don't think this is the last we're going to hear from him. I think he's going to continue to gain ufological celebrity. So I think that we should keep our eyes out. And initially I was very impressed with the guy, but the more times I hear him speak, the less and less impressed I am. And I'm now to the point where I'm just like, this guy's nuts.
Right.
So we'll see what happens. So I'll move on to the next one. Let me pull that up here. Well, we'll stick with UFOs, and we'll go to this one. So there were actually 2 back-to-back incidences with alleged UFO sightings that happened. in Turkey, a pilot sighted what we're just going to go ahead and call a UFO on a radar about 9,000 feet in the air. And this sighting that he had actually caused them to shut down the airport for the next 12 hours and cancel a total of 26 flights. And nobody really knows what the hell it was. All right. So that's cool. That happened on May 20th. On May 22nd, a Taiwanese pilot, commercial flight pilot, also spotted a UFO on radar. This one at about 1,000 feet. Now, this incident was a little less significant. They only shut down the airport for about 40 minutes while they tried to investigate. With this one, there was at least some type of possible explanation. Maybe they said it could have possibly been a drone, but nobody really knows what these things were that popped up. So I don't think it was the same. Let's just pretend it's aliens flying a ship. Okay. I don't think it was the same one. I think that if they can come here from whatever planet they're from, I don't think it's going to take them 2 days to get to Turkey, from Turkey to Taiwan. Right. But very interesting. Any thoughts on what they could have spotted on the radar?
It's a mystery. Sometimes it's drones. Sometimes it's something that you just can't put a name to.
Yeah, I think it was those bird drones.
Yeah, because birds aren't real.
We're back to the CIA again. I love it.
Clearly, it was that. It was just balloons, guys. That's all it was. I don't know.
Swamp gas.
No, swamp gas. When we say UFO, it's really important that we're all on the same page here of what that means. I'm not talking a flying saucer. We're not talking a cigar shape. We're talking a blip on a screen that we could not identify. That was something in the air that was large enough or significant enough to have caught on a commercial flight radar. So,
got it.
Who knows? And because we're a wacky and wild and weird fun show here, I'm gonna give you guys a more lighthearted piece of news. So a man in Louisville, Kentucky, known by the name of Clifton Williams, is facing 5 to 10 years in prison for second-degree murder for shooting his roommate because his roommate ate his Hot Pocket. Okay.
Hot Pockets is pretty serious business.
I'm disappointed because there's no mention of what flavor it was.
Sure.
Right? What kind was it? Was it a ham and cheese?
It is going to be a pepperoni because all the stuff happens with the spicy Hot Pockets.
It's got to be the pepper. I mean, what was it? That's important information. But what got me about this is that how fucking insane is that this man tried to kill his roommate over a Hot Pocket and he's only going to get upwards of 10 years in prison.
Very sympathetic jury.
Like what? Well, it's not the jury that decides that. That's the parameter of his charges. But what fucking world do we live in where that's okay for that kind of person to walk freely in society, right? I don't want that guy as a neighbor.
Or a roommate.
Sadly, you don't get to pick your relatives or your neighbors.
I know. Yeah, you fucking park your car out front of the house and it's 1 inch over to his property line and fucking you're dead meat. I mean, he's going to get you. I don't know. But that's really all I got. Surprisingly, the world must have known that I was out of commission. So therefore, it stopped pumping out news. I don't know. Pato, do you have anything that you want to talk about?
I do. I have one quick news story I want to go through. This is something I texted you the other day. Obama's Higher Ground production company is working on a film about the Betty and Barney Hill abduction. So this is something that I just came across this week on Twitter. Asher's, I sent it to you immediately. But what's interesting is that this story is actually from the very tail end of 2022. Late December 2022, Netflix announced that it was looking to release a feature film, not a documentary, a feature film about the Betty and Barney Hill abduction case, and that it was being produced by Michelle and Barack Obama's Higher Ground production company. A couple of weeks after that, UFC fighter Angela Hill, who is the granddaughter of Betty and Barney Hill. I don't know if we mentioned that on when we did that episode on them. Their granddaughter, Angela, is a UFC fighter. So she told TMZ that the project was moving forward and that she was hoping to be involved. There was not much news since then. And then the story started making the rounds again this week for some reason. I don't know why. Now, I have IMDb Pro for my movie stuff, so I was able to check in on some of the production details. And as of today, it still shows that the film is in pre-production. It still has the same writers attached, the same ones mentioned 6 months ago, and Obama's Higher Ground is still producing the film. So it looks like it's still in some form of production. Movies fall apart all the time, though, and I'm sure the Writers Guild strike isn't helping anything. But I still think it's kind of interesting, especially given Obama's involvement. We don't see a whole lot of done with the alien abduction stuff. Hollywood makes movies about aliens all the time, but they tend to stray away from the abduction phenomenon as we know it, and which is interesting given its place in pop culture. There's a wealth of material out there, something you think that you'd see more of, especially on the streaming services, which are just content machines. And then you also have the involvement of the Obamas with this. And I'm not naive enough to think that like those two are in the writer's room, like working on this. I know that they have a production company and they greenlight material and they say, okay, let's try to move forward on this and that. But still, I think coming from them, they had to sign off on it on some level. And maybe it does have to do because Betty and Barney Hill were an interracial couple. So maybe there's that aspect of the story that maybe is more interesting or something. I don't know. But hell, if they make it, I'll watch it. And we'll probably cover it on Y2K Movies. So that's
very
it.
cool.
What do you think about a Obama-backed Betty and Barney Hill movie?
I didn't know that they made movies, so that was my first question. I thought that was strange. I asked, I was like, have they made other? I mean, is this a thing? And apparently, it is a thing. So I'm not as alarmed. Betty and Barney Hill is a very, very popular case.
Right.
You can, it's one of our top listened to shows because you can make literally anything about them and people will come. So I can't say that. I don't think there's any sneaky connections or anything there. I did initially, if they had no movie production company and this was all brand new and that's what they started with, yeah, I'd be a little bit, I'd be suspicious, but because it's not, I just think that it's just a money grab.
Yeah, but him being an ex-president, I don't see this as confirmation of their story. I don't think that I don't know, maybe you don't. I guess the fact that an ex-president has a movie production company that is producing a movie based on one of the most famous alien abduction cases, it's one of those things where maybe it means something and maybe it's just strictly a business decision. But even at the business decision level, does him choosing to produce this story denote some kind of acceptance of the story? Like, if you know what I mean, or is that too much of a reach?
Well, he's publicly come out and said that he believes aliens exist, or something along those lines. It's very pro extraterrestrial life. So I mean, why can't a U.S. president believe in aliens? What's his name? Clinton did hardcore. Clinton was very serious about it. We've had a couple of presidents that have been very serious about
Carter.
it. We've had presidents that are also into cryptids. Fucking Teddy Roosevelt wanted to make a cryptid one of the state animals for, I don't remember which one, but I mean, my gosh, these people, they're just people. Yeah, they're presidents, but they're also still people with opinions.
Right.
So I don't know. We should get Obama on the show and ask him.
It's too busy podcasting with Springsteen.
So anyway, I think it is interesting.
Yeah.
So
Terry, you got anything, or are we ready to do this?
Well, I've got something for you then.
Sure.
It's a recent news story, but it's actually covering something that happened over 100 years ago.
Oh, okay.
You're familiar with the Tunguska event, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back in 1908, when something blew up over Russia and laid down about 80 million trees.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They estimate it was, the explosion was between 10 and 15 megatons. But I read an article today where they were talking about they still don't know exactly what happened because there's no crater, there's no sign of fragments of meteorites that they found in the impact area. And so they're still somewhat at a loss as to exactly what that event was.
Mhm.
And personally, I've always thought it was a ricochet. And they mentioned that in the article as well, where a nickel iron asteroid skipped off the atmosphere. It almost hit us. It bounced through the atmosphere and went flying off. And the impact was enough to create a 10 or 15 megaton explosion. That would have
Wow.
been, something that basically killed us if it hit
Yeah.
us. And I thought that was a pretty interesting thing that even after all this time looking, they still don't really know what happened.
Well, I mean, it just goes to show that something from space doesn't have to be piloted to be a threat, you know? So
Yes,
we
but
are
who's
very
to say
lucky
it
every single
wasn't
day.
aimed on purpose?
That's true. That's very true. It could have been a warning shot. Like, listen, you
Starship
guys,
Troopers, yeah.
calm your shit down, or we're gonna, blast you. No, that is a really interesting event. It's so weird. It's one of those. It's a fun story because it's one of those things that just happens, and you're like, I don't know. It is. We didn't have the technology back in 1908 to really test, and do all the things that we possibly could have done to maybe get to the bottom of it. And so nowadays we're just like, well, here's this thing that happened and we're not really sure why. Um,
Well, it was
oh,
the
I'm sorry.
middle
Go
of
ahead.
Siberia, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't even think they. How long did it take them to discover it? Because it's not like people were living out there.
Oh, it was there were eyewitness accounts of it that said a wall of fire split the sky apart. Human beings did see it happen,
Oh
and
wow.
it was reported when it occurred, although word of it getting out took a little bit of time to make it happen, but it wasn't undiscovered. They knew about it immediately.
Mm. Yeah, that's crazy.
I can hardly imagine seeing something like that. That would be end of the world stuff.
Oh yeah, you'd be fucking horrified. I had a weird experience at one point in my life. I mean, I've had plenty, but one in particular that I had. I mean, I legitimately thought that like something was happening. I didn't know what. I probably still told the story before, but I'll tell it real quick. I was sitting at home with my husband at the time. I was watching him play a video game, and we were just doing nothing, and the lights kind of flickered, but it was no big deal. And then all of a sudden, all everything in the house started flickering, which I'm very familiar with as an electrical concept because I happen to work for the utility company, so I get it. But what was happening outside was very fucking weird. I mean, there were like lights oscillating red and blue and green and red and blue and green, and there was a weird noise that was kind of just filling the air. It was kind of a weird buzzing noise. And I'd never experienced anything like it. There was no explosion. There was no anything happening. So the transformer happened to be right outside of our windows. Nothing happening there, and all of a sudden everything shuts off. But in that moment, when you have absolutely no idea what is going on and the entire world is flashing around you, do you think that like you just got hit with a nuke? You don't know. You think you're dying. And it is fucking horrifying. And still to this day, have absolutely no idea what happened. Um, they said the transformer blew. There's no way. My mother, who is about 8 miles away from me at the time, saw it from her house and tried to call me and figure out what was going on, but we were panicked. It was crazy. It was insane.
There was I was in the middle of installing a new garage door opener at my house with one of my buddies, and we were in the garage, and we had the garage door pulled back, and we were lining everything up. And this was maybe like 5 years ago. It was at the height of North Korea doing ICBM tests and shit. And we're sitting there, and there's a huge boom, and the house rattled so hard that the garage door slid shut. And I look at my buddy and I'm like, "What's that?" And he's like, "I don't know." And I could tell that he was really rattled. And he was like, he went back to doing whatever he was doing up on the ladder. And we kind of sat there for a minute. And I started hearing car alarms go off and shit. And I went and I opened the garage door. And right before I pulled it up, I thought to myself, you don't know what the fuck you're going to see when you open this garage door, right? I could see a mushroom cloud in the distance. I could see anything. I didn't even know if I should open the garage door. because I was like, who knows? Like, we might be safer with this thing shut for the time being. And I opened the garage door, and I kind of looked around, and I just saw neighbors coming out of their house. And I walked to the end of my driveway, and I looked around, and everyone's looking around, and everyone's like, "Did you hear that?" Like, yeah, that's why we're all on our fucking front lawn right now. Of course, we all heard it. And looking around, and you could see kind of smoke coming from the distance. And what had happened was a meth house blew up or something,
Oh, Jesus.
like two neighborhoods over. And the guy had, not only was he cooking meth, but he had fireworks and bullets and shit. So it was a real big explosion when that house.
Sure. Why just have meth? You can have other explosives. I mean, if it's going to go wrong, it's going to go really wrong. Did you hear about the dairy farm that had an explosion recently?
In the grain silo?
I'm not sure. Maybe it was in the grain silo. All I know is that a dairy farm had an explosion that killed some people and killed 16,000 cows.
Whoa.
It was like a couple of months ago. 16 or 18,000 cows. A lot of cows.
Dude, that's a lot of fucking money. I hope they have cow insurance. They got to.
Cow insurance.
Well, seriously, dude. You know how much steer?
You gotta take those by State Farm. They got to go out and check the quality of the cow. Make sure it's up to spec before they give you the insurance.
That's like, I guarantee you, that's like over $1 million worth of cows.
Oh yeah, easy.
Yeah.
Many times more than $1 million, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure there is some type of insurance for it. That makes sense. Maybe all those cattle mutilations that happen are just people trying to get the insurance.
Oh, it's an insurance
scam.
Dude, solved it. Totally solved the mystery.
That is, I know that just rolled out of your mouth right now, but that is goddamn one of the smartest fucking things you've ever said on this show. I absolutely, dude, maybe.
It makes a lot more sense than aliens coming and taking their eyeballs and buttholes, I mean, serious.
Right? We're gonna take this cow, we're gonna carve it up. And then we're going to file an insurance claim. Oh, yeah. Insurance fraud is very real. It's something that people do. Yeah. So, speaking of very real, so's our guest this week, Terry Mixon. Terry Mixon is
totally not real.
He's an AI construct.
Yes.
But he's
switched to AI.
He's also a #1 best-selling military science fiction author. He served as a non-commissioned officer in the United States Army 101st Airborne Division before working alongside the flight controllers in Mission Control Center at the NASA Johnson Space Center, supporting the Space Shuttle, the International Space Station, and other human spaceflight projects for almost 2 decades. He's a long-time reader that finally decided to settle down to tell a few stories of his own. He lives in the great state of Texas with his lovely wife and a pound of cats. You can find him online at terrymixon.com. I'm sure we'll have a link in the show notes. And you can watch him stream every Thursday, more or less, with me and a couple other knuckleheads on Welcome to the Grindhouse. Terry, my friend, thank you for coming on.
And I also stream on Saturdays with the Dead Robot Society writing podcast.
Yes, lest we forget that. Are you on social media? I know you're not on Twitter.
I am. I'm on Facebook. On Facebook.
Oh, fucking Facebook. All right.
I have a Twitter handle, but I don't do much there.
So my question is, so I have 2 cats. One of my cats is 20 pounds. Do you just have like a pygmy cats, like little tiny, and they all equal?
He misread that. It's a pounce of cats, not a pound of cats.
You're absolutely right. A pounce of cats. I see it right now in my notes. I think my mind just made that.
Red has to get on top of it and make a pound of cats meme.
And I'm sure that a group of cats is not called a pounce, but that's what I'm going to call them anyway.
Sure. You're a science fiction writer. You can just do whatever.
Sounds good to me.
Definitely.
Pat O just mispronounces words all the time. Obviously, he's got no dignity.
That's a key thing that for somebody that wants to work for the CIA, you got to be able to make shit up.
Yeah, right. Well, he's good at it. No, I just wanted to make sure. I was like, wait, only 1 pound of cat? That's not a lot of cat. Anyway.
Yes,
ignore right. Me.
No, of course I couldn't if I wanted to. You're you are the host of the show, so
my show. Yeah,
we cannot afford to ignore you. But kind of like I mentioned in the intro, this whole thing happened very serendipitously. One of my functions on Welcome to the Grindhouse is to do movie reviews, and it was probably like the 3rd week that they asked me to do one, and I had just happened to watch Level, the Flat Earth documentary, that week. And choosing the path of least resistance, I decided to make my movie review on Welcome to the Grindhouse that week about Level. And as soon as I got done giving my little spiel, it was brought to my attention that Terry, who I knew as a science fiction author and gamer, Terry was also a ex NASA employee, which of course meant he had to come on the show. So yeah, the flat Earth thing, I am not a flat earther, but I have definitely been going down the rabbit hole with it recently because, number one, from a sociological point of view, it's very interesting how widespread how some people think that the we are being deceived on this large of a level, right? That deception is this grand that we don't even know the shape of the planet that we live on, that we're being lied to about that. And I can appreciate conspiracy theorists, and I can believe, people that have a healthy sense of distrust of not necessarily believing everything they read. But to go this far, I feel is something very unique. And it's always interests me the people that believe in it, how they justify it to themselves, how they counteract all of the other evidence that we seem to be inundated with since birth that says that we live on a globe. And yet there's some people that say that's all bullshit. The Earth's actually flat. There's a dome over us and shit. And the universe spins around us, not the other way around. And it's interesting to hear their arguments as far as science goes. I'm not going to get into that because I'm not a physicist. But I started listening to this podcast that is called the Flat Earth Files. And one of the things that was interesting about this podcast was that the host is ex-military. And some of the guests that he has on are also servicemen, ex-military. They're also flat earthers. And I thought that was really interesting to me because it kind of set up a couple different possible scenarios, right? Like maybe these guys are just all a little off their rocker, right? Or maybe this is some kind of disinformation campaign, right? It's interesting they all have this military connection. Or just playing devil's advocate, maybe these guys witnessed something in their travels that led them down this path to believe this concept of reality, right? And that all brings us here with Terry. So the very first question that I'm going to ask you, Terry, as a guy that's been around and seen some things, in your opinion, is the Earth flat?
Well, first, let me start off by saying what I did at NASA. So I give a little sketch because lots of people work at NASA. They do lots of different things. What I did, I was hired to the first couple of years I was there. I was a entry-level Linux system administrator in the Mission Control Center.
Okay.
And so I was one of their root computer guys. And after that, I transitioned to being a frontline tech support for the flight controllers themselves. I was the guy that made sure that whenever they clicked a button on their screen, what they expected to happen happened. The data they expected to see appeared. That was my job. So I was in the Mission Control Center for 16 years, working alongside all of those folks. And to answer your question, the Earth is round. I'm sorry. If you believe otherwise, I'm afraid that the Earth is round.
Thank you for settling this.
I wanted it straight from the horse's mouth that I believe Terry to be an honorable man. I don't think he's.
I was a helicopter crew chief in the military back in the 80s. That's what I did there. And I've flown high enough to see the curvature of the Earth. I personally have witnessed that the Earth is a sphere.
Yes, that's exactly. And that's why it blows my mind that these alleged military men, which tells me that maybe they weren't military at all, have been in a plane and didn't realize.
I would never claim that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. If they say they are, I'm going to take them at face value. Believe all.
Sure. I don't like putting down people for having views that I don't agree with, but I'm going to have to go ahead and poke a little bit at the flat Earth people because there's plenty of evidence that if you look up in the sky, if the moon is not flat, why would the Earth be flat?
Yeah.
Gotta say, it's right there over your head.
Well, I think they say that the moon is also flat because we can only see. I don't know what they say. I don't know. They're dumb. That's what I'm going to say. I'm going to poke fun at them directly.
There is no unified theory of flat earthness. And I think that anything that comes from a third party source, any piece of data or information that you're going to give these people that they have not witnessed themselves or they can't personally verify, they're going to call into question. And that's why I think that the movement itself is kind of interesting, because that is how widespread their distrust for institutions are, is that they don't even, but you could give them like, oh, this is a history book that was written by professors that's being taught in school. There's a lot of people that are flat earthers that also homeschool their kids too, and it's because they don't trust any of that stuff. They don't trust anything. Not that
There is a thing called confirmation bias, and people that get into cults, get into closed systems of belief, they hear the things that reinforce what they expect to be true, and they dismiss out of hand anything that disputes that. And so it becomes a self confirming cycle for them.
Mhm.
Yes. They already start with a belief. They don't learn it and they're like, oh my gosh, that makes sense. It doesn't like fall into place like you're learning anything. They already start with some type of belief and then they will throw out anything that doesn't fuel that belief.
And you can be very smart and still have a belief that falls outside of the mainstream. When I was working at NASA, there was a brilliant software engineer that worked there. He was, if there was a problem, he was the guy that they went to fix it. And during a conversation, I knew him for years. During a conversation with him one day, he felt the need to drop on me that the Earth was only 10,000 years old.
Oh, wow.
And I said, I was shocked to hear it. And I'm like, you have heard of radiocarbon dating, right? And he had explanations for it.
Right.
Oh, no, the science is just wrong about that.
Y-
He had already all the science bits that he wanted to pick and choose to fit that belief. And I didn't tell him he was crazy, but I'm pretty sure he got the impression that I didn't, share that belief with him.
Well, you talk about the carbon dating, like you're absolutely right. I mean, that's a perfect example. Somebody's just telling me that they ran a machine on this rock, and the machine told them that the rock is, 10 million years old. Well, okay, what if your machine's wrong, or what if you're lying to me? That's how they are. That's that argument is like, well, why should I believe you? You could be lying to me. And that's how deep some people's level of distrust is.
When you run into people like that, the question to ask is, what kind of evidence would you accept as something to open your mind to consider that you might not be correct? Because they're going to have a very high bar for whatever it is before they'll believe anything. A couple of years ago, there was a story about a guy that wanted to build his own rocket, a flat earther, so that he could go ahead and fly up and make sure that the earth was in fact flat. And I don't recall exactly what happened with that, but it can't have been good.
I think it blew up. I remember what you're talking about. He built it in his backyard.
Yeah, that's the guy.
Yeah. I don't remember either. They might have either stopped him from doing it because they thought he was going to blow up the neighborhood or something, or what. But yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting that there's a whole culture about it, and people's level of distrust. I think that is. I guess maybe it's good that they're questioning things, but to go to this extreme or to kind of want to die on this hill is a little odd. And you're right. There's a very creationist bent to it. There's a lot of religious undertones, and then depending on who you think is pulling the strings on in the flat Earth conspiracies, when people start talking about Jesuits and shit, you're just like, all right, man, get the fuck out of here. Like, I went to private high school. Like, trust me, those people are fucking behind, lying about the fucking shape of the earth,
I personally, like to think of it this way. There's a reason why it takes a village, okay? Because we are just not capable of knowing absolutely everything about everything, right?
Mhm.
I happen to be, this is going to be a shock to everybody, but I am terrible when it comes to, cars and auto care and, things like that. So when these people, basically what they're saying, okay, so this would be equivalent to me going to go get my brakes done, right, at the auto mechanic. And because I don't know anything about brakes, and I don't know when I need them, I don't know what a good brake looks like, I have no idea, I'm going to automatically distrust the auto mechanic because I don't have the correct information in front of me to be able, I mean, that's what this is. You have these people questioning people in a place of authority that do know about this stuff. And meanwhile, they have absolutely no credentials at all except for their Google searches and their YouTube videos. And that doesn't make an education.
There's a thing called the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yes.
And with that, it's someone knows so little about a subject that they think they are an expert at it because they don't realize their own ignorance.
Yes.
And I think that plays into this as well.
Yes, it does. And it's a big part of this this overall weird community in general. You got a lot of people that go out there. You got a lot of Bigfooters. We talk about these Squatch bros, these Bigfoot bros that go out.
My wife watched Hunting Bigfoot. She watched all of the episodes of that. I'm like shaking my head going, okay, it's entertaining, but yeah.
It's like 12 seasons. They haven't found them yet. So I don't, because they're going out to the woods. They don't even know what they're looking for. They don't even know. They have no idea.
This is prime Squatch territory. How would you know?
Right. How do you know that? What indicators is it that you're looking for? Do you know anything about collecting evidence at all for these things? Have you ever been on an actual expedition and tracked real animals and figured out? And most of these people haven't, and this is just, again, within my community, it's a big issue. And, one thing, when you start kind of unraveling the thread there and going, look, this is why this doesn't make sense, and let me explain it to you, then they throw their hands up and scream government conspiracy or government cover up, and that's their escape route, and that's it. I'm now a plant, and they don't trust me, and I don't. It is strange. I've tried to get to the bottom of it. I've tried to talk to some of these people and be like, why is it that you believe this? And it always ends in anger. Every single time it is a violent response.
You see, unfortunately, there are some people in the world that don't want to hear your opinion. They want to hear their opinion coming out of your mouth.
Yeah, exactly. And I just will never they won't talk to me enough for me to even understand it. I'm like, why do you think this way? We need to get like a reformed person to come on the show and explain what it is. I mean, what is the genetic makeup there? How were you raised? Like, why did you get to this point to where, you can't trust conventional science? Why did you get to this point where you can't, trust these experts and what they're telling you? I think that would be really interesting.
I'm not shitting on Bigfoot people, especially the episode before Monster Fest, but I
Fair enough.
find it interesting that, everyone latches on people that are in this community that are into this stuff. They all have something that they kind of hang their hat on that they're the most interested in, right? And I've gone on record about mine are, UFOs and conspiracies and stuff, and for all those reasons. But I find it interesting for people that that are really into Bigfoot, like that's their thing, right?
All they care about, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like, well, why? Because it doesn't. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I live in an urban center. Like I live in fucking Chicago. Like there's no Bigfoot.
Why do you
here.
like UFOs? I mean,
because it's like the ultimate thing. If there's other life, if we're not the only sentient beings in the universe, it's one of the biggest questions there is. I could see people that are obsessed about ghosts because it deals with the afterlife in a similar way, right? What happens when we die? Do we hang around as ghosts, or do we go to heaven, or do we go to hell, or is there nothing, or what's the deal, right? People that are trying to figure out what happens after, life after death. I get that, right? People that are, like I said, the UFO thing, or conspiracies. Okay, on what level is this all subterfuge and manipulation, right? And maybe that's just me explaining when my shit makes sense and your shit doesn't, right? It's once again, it's bias. But yeah, the Bigfoot thing, people that are all about the Bigfoot and kind of, I don't know what that is.
Well, because in a similar vein, Pato, when we do eventually discover Bigfoot, because in my opinion, that it's out there, when that does happen, there's been a lot of speculation about what this thing actually is. And there are groups of people that believe that this is another type of human. And so if this is another type of human, then that would be another piece of the puzzle to kind of try to explain where we come from. So there is that bigger overall theme of it. I don't know if that's why Bigfoot bros are really into it. I have no idea, but
I totally want to see a brawl between the Bigfoot bros and the Yeti people.
Oh God. Well, which one? Oh, they go at it all the time about, you got Bigfoot bros that are like, oh, aliens are ridiculous. Then you got the UFO people that are like, oh, Bigfoot's ridiculous, and it's like, are you serious right now?
Yeah, I don't think any of it's. I'll listen to anybody's story about anything. You know what I mean? I don't. I don't. I don't think it's. I'm not going to yuck anybody's yum. I personally like could care less. It's one of like the not really interesting. Now the missing 411 stuff that kind of piques my interest because there's such a sinister bent to it. That now you've got me interested again, because there does seem to be some kind of cover up associated with that. That's all the Bigfoot sightings and the disappearances in the national parks. That I'll sit there, that will activate me, I guess. But your run of the mill Bigfoot stuff doesn't really do too much.
We'll talk about it one day, but
Yeah.
you're going to be sad about what I have to say about it, Pato.
All right. Well,
Bring your tissues.
yeah.
Yeah.
I've learned to live with disappointment. It's all right.
Get ready. Get ready to have your dreams dashed. No, it's I haven't deep dived it that much. Just from, again, like the Gary Nolan thing. My eye's been on that guy, and that guy who runs the whole thing seems like he lies about a lot of things. And we'll see. Eventually, I will. But
So
anyway, go ahead.
Next question I had for Terry. So when you revealed yourself to be an ex-NASA employee, you said, "Go ahead, ask me anything." And I was very much put on the spot. I recommend everyone go back and watch that episode because it's.
You were shocked.
I was
amazing.
It was funny. But the first thing that just came to my head is, why haven't we been back to the moon? That's the only thing I could think to ask. Is
who says we haven't been?
Are you?
No, I know that we have not been back to the moon.
Yeah,
and I thought I'd ask that you just to drag it right out.
Yeah. So what's your take on that? Is it just, I mean, the
Money?
But I don't know. I mean, money, but we've already, like, when
Politicians are so cheap. I told you this during the show, and I'll mention it here so that folks get it too. Outside of the NASA Space Center here in Houston and the one in Florida, you have a Saturn V rocket in front of each of them. Do you know why those were never used?
You had said because they couldn't afford the gas.
They didn't. Congress wouldn't pay the money to fuel them.
But they spent the money to build them.
They spent all the money to build them, but they wouldn't pay the money to use them. That's cheapness right there.
But that sounds so ridiculous. Then why would you spend the money to build them in the first place?
I couldn't answer that question. A little bit before my time.
Yeah. I mean,
I can answer that question. I'll tell you why. It's because when we create a budget, okay, if we don't use the entirety of the budget, right, then the following, the next time we do our budgeting, that means that the budget gets cut. So what you do is you then spend your money on frivolous shit that you don't intend on using. So that way next year's budget is bigger, and then the following year's budget is bigger, because the real conspiracy is that, again, these are just rich people trying to get richer, and they pocket a lot of the money. Let's be honest, they do. And so they just want to continue to make sure that they grow that budget, and they continue to have an excuse to throw more at it. Well, look, last year we built these rockets and we need to use them. So next year you need to give us money for fuel. Well, they get the money for the fuel. Instead of spending it on the fuel, they will write it in a very special way so that the money just gets rerouted back to them, or to something else that they wanted more money for that they couldn't justify on the floor. That's why. That's what happens.
It's entirely possible.
What is, I guess, what was the majority of the NASA operations when you were working with them? If we're not going to the moon, what are we doing? We're going to the space station mostly?
They focused a lot of attention on the International Space Station. I started working there before the first piece went up, and it was complete before I left. So the time I was there, they spent a lot of time on that. A lot of time and money was spent on the space shuttle. And once the space shuttle was closed down, things got ugly and people started getting cut. And that's pretty much when I got laid off. So that was the time where the great culling began.
What year was that? If you don't mind me asking, what year was that when you got laid off?
I was laid off in 2015.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Because there was I remember there being a big stink, and it probably started back in 2015, actually more like 2011,
Yeah.
where Congress had said we're not going to fund NASA anymore, and people are kind of pissed off about that because, well, why wouldn't we? As humans, we want that, exploration. So yeah, that tracks. I believe that.
So nowadays, you're going to, if you're, once the International Space Station is gone, you're going to have to say what's coming next, and you're going to be looking at private companies like SpaceX or
Mhm.
JetBlue or whomever, and say, well, what are the private companies going to do? And now you're going to have the corporate element in it. I think that's going to be fun to watch, because then people will be going, what are the corporations really doing in space?
Oh yeah, of course. They're already all lizard people, right? So I mean,
Right. If you ever look at Mark Zuckerberg, you know for a fact that they are lizards.
his gray shirt is just his skin. Um, that's why he never takes it off.
But what? So you talk about space, like private enterprise going into space and SpaceX, like all the problems they've had with getting a rocket off the ground. Aren't they just? This is technology that we had, 50 years ago, 50 plus years ago, and we could do it then with less than what we have now. And now we can't. It seems like we can't even do it again. You know.
You're right and wrong at the same time. Space work is always dangerous. And whenever you start with a new design, you're going to have a much higher chance of lawn darting, having it either crash or blow up on launch until you figure out the things that are going wrong. It is totally not unusual to have a new spacecraft, a new rocket, suffer failure after failure after failure in the beginning until they iron out all those kinks. That is not unusual at all. It was that way from the very beginning.
So you think like the where the private enterprises are at right now, it's where they should be, and it's kind of progressing at
I
a.
do. I think that they are doing the things that they need to do. I think that the last blow up that they had with SpaceX's big rocket, they tried to do a lot of things. They didn't actually expect it was going to get off the launch pad. They expected it was going to blow on the launch pad or crash right above it. And so when they got as far as they did, they collected a lot more data than they thought they would get. So people might say, oh, it blew up, it's a failure. That's not true. They got so much data, it is an uncategorical success.
Okay. Yeah, and it's interesting to think that we live in different times too, where the media plays a different role. And when NASA was doing this stuff, it was probably kept kind of secret for the most part, right? And now when Elon tries to shoot a rocket up, it's all over fucking Twitter and the news, and everyone there is there to watch it blow up. And that's a way different climate than what we had back in the 50s and 60s.
Well,
Um,
back in the 50s and 60s, NASA was basically military adjacent. All of your people that were involved with it were ex-military test pilots and that sort of thing. So there was a whole lot of that there. And remember that with Apollo 1, it caught fire with the crew inside and killed 3 astronauts on the pad.
mhm,
This is not a safe thing that they do.
right.
Yeah, I mean, how many Apollo missions were there before we actually landed on the moon? You know what I mean? It isn't linear. That I mean, it's not an easy process, and now here we are.
What do
See,
you
Apollo 11 landed, Apollo 10 circled the moon, but they had those 9 in front of it that had to get the data that they needed to make sure that everything was working the way they wanted before they risked a human being.
So what do you think the next thing for us to do in space is? Is it another like you said when the space station is gone, is it going to be is it just kind of enough for us to float around out there, or are we really going to have to start landing places?
We're going to have
You
to
know.
start landing places. What I think should be happening, and this is just my personal opinion rather than what a lot of other people might say, I think that mining in space to get the raw materials to build things in space so that humanity can move off the planet and be on the moon, be on Mars. That's going to be a big thing. Finding a big asteroid that can be smelted to provide metals in space that you don't have to ship up and you can take the carbon stuff and you get the oxygen and the other stuff that you want to get from that is also a big key. I think that's somewhere that someone's going to be looking for, and just wait for the precious metal markets to crash after that happens.
Well, we're doing that already. NASA's got a plan, manned mission on the moon in 2025,
Sure.
and the intention there is to then take raw materials from the moon and use that to either propel further out into further space exploration, or like you said, kind of create a new base there, because now we're shutting down the International Space Station. It's we're not servicing it anymore. We're done with it. And so now the idea is to kind of project further out. So there are plans to go back. It's just that it's taking forever. I think they announced that back in like
I don't think
2019.
they're going to make it by 2025. I would be
No.
very shocked if that happens.
It was originally 2024 last year, and now it's 2025. They'll keep pushing
If
it
it
off.
happens before 2030, I'll be astonished. Hell, let me just
Yep.
say, if it happens at all, I'll be astonished.
Yes. But they've announced it. So the rest of the world were like, hey, NASA, you told us you were doing this now. So,
Okay. We kind of talked about this before we started recording, but I wanted to get your thoughts on Space Force as both a military man, ex-NASA employee, and science fiction author. How many boxes does this check for you? And their current mission statement is just they have kind of outer atmospheric territory. It's basically protecting the satellites, kind of. Do you see that as becoming a more involved military branch if we do start doing this stuff on the moon and trying to mine asteroids? Do you see space combat as something that we might have to deal with in our lifetime?
Oh, I absolutely do think that that's going to be something. But the combat we're going to be dealing with in our lifetime is going to be satellites and satellite killers. We're going to have, they already have issues with satellites that start trailing other satellites because they're trying to get information on them. How long before one of those uses an explosive device to blow up somebody else's satellite in orbit rather than using a laser from the surface? It's going to be protecting our orbital assets is going to be where they have to focus their attention, because that's where the combat's going to be.
Right.
kind of a passive aggressive approach, because if you take out one of our satellites, well, what does that satellite affect?
Ground communication between troops and stuff like that, or communicate. Yeah. So, well, that'll be interesting. The other thing I wanted to bring up, the balloons. That was something that I know, Ashes, you kind of popped in when we were talking about this, but a couple months back, that was, there was a good week and a half where these things were all over the fucking place. And being in the Midwest, there was a really hairy situation where they were chasing something all over Wisconsin, and they were shutting down airspace, and it was definitely the story of the weekend. And then it kind of went away, and we haven't heard too much about it since, and there's been no repeat incidents. And the explanation that we kind of got was that whoever monitors this space, and I'm sure Terry or know exactly what agency, but that they had expanded their search parameters to they had widened their search parameters, and that led us to respond to things like these balloons that were floating overhead. And that's why for a good weekend, there was a lot us chasing these things all over the place. And then I don't know if we've reset those search parameters so we're no longer doing that, or it's no longer making the news. But we had kind of talked before the show about this topic, and you had said that you thought that it's not that these things go away, they've always been there, and that they're not exactly, they could be dangerous.
It's really hard to detect something like a balloon with the current level of technology that we have, especially one that's flying so high. The way that they detected the Chinese spy balloon is because it had a huge payload with solar cells hanging off the bottom of it, and it was big enough to be visible from the ground. People could see the dot moving across the sky. Something smaller than that, radar's not going to pick it up, not usually. And what people need to be worried about with something like that isn't that necessarily that your enemies are spying on you. It's because if they send a spy balloon this time, what's to say they don't send a biological weapon the next time? Or perhaps something like an EMP device. There's all kinds of things that could be delivered just by launching a balloon and waiting for the right time to set it off.
And is this something that like is kind of happening all over the globe? Like, do we have balloons over other countries? And how many different countries? Like, how many players are there in this game?
I have no idea, but if I had to make a bet, I'd say that anything that our enemies are doing, we're doing too.
Right, right. And is this so? When you were with the 101st Airborne, like, what was that stuff? Is that I know that was in the Army, but you like a parachute jumper or what?
Well, the 101st, while it's an airborne unit, is actually repelling. That's what they do. They do something called air assault. And so you rappel out of helicopters and land on the ground there. But what I did was I was a scout helicopter crew chief. So I worked with the attack helicopters as a mechanic, for the scouts that looked for things for them, the hunter killer teams.
Gotcha. Um, yeah. So like with them going back to the balloons real quick. I'm sorry, it's a good detour with that. But with us scrambling jets and all that activity that weekend, why has that? Why were we not living in that world anymore? You know what I mean? Like,
Because it's not politically expedient for whoever is having those issues to make them public again. You'll notice that when this first came out, there was political finger pointing, saying, "Oh, look what this administration did." Then, lo and behold, it comes out, "Oh, this has been going on for years, and it happened under the previous administration."
yeah,
And now you can't use it as a political talking point, and suddenly it's gone. Amazing how that works, right?
Asher, you got anything?
Uh, yeah. I mean, I've got a question, but I didn't know if you were done with your questions.
Yeah.
Okay, Terry, what have you ever experienced anything that defies your kind of natural view of the world and didn't really make a lot of sense?
Oh,
Just
sure.
anything, really.
Absolutely. When I was a younger man, when I was I guess I was 14 or 15, I saw a UFO. I saw something floating in the sky that certainly looked like a spacecraft, and I have no explanation for it. I don't know why it happened. It could have, who knows what it was. I was riding through the center of town, mind you, in a small town that I lived in, and I saw it floating above the town. I have no explanation. Nobody ever said anything about it. Maybe I was hallucinating. Who knows? And when I was a little younger than that, I saw a ghost. My parents owned a drive-in grocery store, and
Oh, that's cool.
I saw a man walking into the back of the store, and he went past where the bathrooms were. And so I went back there to tell him that he'd went too far and there was nothing back there, but there's no exit back there and there was no person either.
Very,
So,
very spooky. Have these experiences, have they kind of molded you? Because obviously now, I mean, nowadays you are I don't know if you have a day job or if writing is now your day job.
I've
But
been a full-time author for almost a decade now.
well, wow, congratulations. I mean, it's tough out there. So good for you.
Almost 4 novels written and co-written. So I've been plugging away at it.
Very nice. Very nice. I mean, have these experiences kind of molded, your interests in these topics or, do you think you kind of had both hand in hand together or, is there anything that, I mean, obviously, science fiction is a very interesting topic and it takes a very special kind of weird to get into it.
I don't know that I would say that either of those events specifically formed anything that I'm doing in my writing, but they definitely make me keep an open mind for experiencing something that I can't explain, but still accept that something happened, whatever that might have been.
Gotcha. Do you get fans of your books and things like that try to reach out to you and share maybe their real life encounters or anything like that?
I haven't had anybody share any encounters like that, but I do get contacted quite a bit by people talking about my stories and what they meant to them. They haven't mentioned anything like a UFO encounter or anything like that, but it wouldn't shock me if that happened, if they did.
I'm honestly surprised to hear that nobody has. Just I would think that, maybe that would be one of the first points of contact. But
Well, maybe it's because I write science fiction that is based in the far, far future. And so it's
Gotcha.
not like modern day where something science fictioning is happening. I might be more approachable for something like a UFO sighting if I was closer to present day in what I write.
Yeah, could you give us a brief rundown of you have a couple series that you have written? What are
Sure.
some of what are some of your books about?
The series that I started off with was called Empire of Bones, and it's something set so far in the future that mankind is spread out far across the stars, but something terrible happened 500 years ago, and the Terran Empire basically crashed and died. There was something going on. People don't know what it was. The survivors are all from a single world, and they finally regained spaceflight, and they're exploring the dead Terran Empire to find out what happened. And so that's that story. Currently, I've wrote 14 books in that series, and I'm still working on the 15th. So I've got one more to poke out in that. And I'm currently writing a series called The
Wow.
Last Hunter, which is about alien invasion in the far future, with basically robotic aliens and non-robotic aliens invading human space and trying to conquer it, and having to be fought off by somebody using technology from a previous invasion, an ancient battleship.
Very cool. What kind of real life events influence how you go about your world building? I mean, obviously, that the creative process starts somewhere, and typically it's somewhere based in reality. Do you have any particular influences?
I read a lot of science fiction when I was a kid. I came at writing backwards from a lot of other writers. I'm not somebody that knew I wanted to write my entire life. I'm basically a disgruntled reader that said, I'm tired of not reading the stories that I want to read. And I said, I can write one of those. One of my friends sent me a manuscript of a novel he'd written, and it was like an eye opening event for me. I was like, wait a minute. If I'm not reading what I want to read, I can go ahead and write the kind of stories that I loved growing up myself. And that's what I started doing.
I actually I took a page out of your book then, Terry, because that's me right there. I
Yay.
agree. I was tired of, the monotone and the dreary and the sad and the and the scary stories. I wanted the truth, and so I wanted the truth to be presented in a way that was easy for me to take in. I have really bad ADHD, and honestly, unless the word "fuck" is said at least 5 times in a topic, I'm just lost. So. Uh, I can absolutely relate to what you did. Hey, if you want something done right, do it yourself.
Be the change you want to see in the world.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Obviously, other people agreed because I found an audience.
Exactly. Yes. That's well, and that's what it is. You kind of start off with your passions as a fan, and so what you got to know what the fans want, and the best way to do that is to be one yourself. So
Exactly.
And what
Write what you love.
what uh what prompted you to start the podcast?
It's another thing that I came in backwards about. The podcast was actually started by someone else, and I knew them, and I was listening to the podcast because I was still trying to become a writer at that point in time. This was before I'd started writing. I wasted about 5 years of time reading books on writing and doing everything except actually writing. And that's a different level of trap to fall into as a writer, is you get caught in the world building disease where you're building everything up that you need to build up rather than just writing the story itself.
Hmm.
And when I found out about the Dead Robot Society at that point in time, there were 3 or 4, maybe 5 co-hosts that were doing this. And to get experience at writing stuff, I started writing erotic romances under a pen name and posting it on the internet to get feedback on my writing style. And
Literotica?
yeah, well, I posted stuff to Literotica, to Stories Online, places like that. And once I had done that, one of the hosts said, do you want to come on and talk about erotica? And so I agreed to come on and talk about that. And it was such a good experience that they invited me to come back and join them as a co-host after, I think, maybe a couple of months after that. And in the time since then, the person that created the show passed away, and all of the other co-hosts either stopped writing or just fell off the face of the earth. And so I inherited the show by default.
I do NaNoWriMo not every year, but semi regularly. And one year I did it, And my wife was like, "Why don't you write something for me?" And I said, "Okay." And she really likes erotica and like Jodi
Nothing
Picoult.
wrong with it.
No, no, not at all. I mean, I knew literotica when you said it. Um Jodi Picoult and like Twilight and like I don't know, she reads like girl stuff. And so I tried to do something that was in the vein of all of that, where there was vampires and there was kink, because it was in 50 Shades was really big, and it was this, homogenization of all these influences that I thought she had, but then just kind of put in a pot and then spit out through my own lens. And I really enjoyed it. And um, but I did kind of think, like, I'm only now starting to publish this. I have so much shit on my computer that I've written over the years. And now with Amazon being where it's at with the self-publishing stuff, I'm now finally getting around to publishing this stuff. My goal is to do at least one a year, and maybe ramp that up at some point to do two. Um and you know it's hard because I don't know if I want to create a separate identity for that. And
If
that's
you're going to write erotica, it's perfectly okay to use a pen name.
yeah.
I did when I was writing it, and you should too as well.
Yeah. And going back to Literotica, I had heard, so I'm very familiar with the website. I used to work midnights for 7 years, and I would spend a lot of time on that. And I had heard that there was more well-known authors than you would think that have aliases on there. Even going so far as to say people like Stephen King that that are active on Literotica, and
Could be.
that will write stuff and put it on there just because they want an outlet for it, and they have a story they want to tell, and I'm not going to try to get this published, but I want people to read it because I'm a writer. And they'll use that as kind of their dumping ground. I always thought that was very fascinating. Once again, who would, like you said, could be. You wouldn't know. That's the whole point, right? But
That's the point of having one of those pen names.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I'm good at creating aliases, as Asher knows.
No, you're not. You tell everybody what they are immediately.
No, my erotic pen name would be Francis Dugal, because that's my middle name and my grandmother's maiden name.
You just told everybody.
Well, yeah, but like people to listen to this fucking episode. I mean, I'm not gonna post it anywhere else. But yes, if you ever come across erotica smut written by Francis Dugal, because Francis is also potentially a female name too, right? So they could think that it's a girl writing it. Anyway, that was was your pen name male or female?
My pen name, the one I used on Literotica, was non-gender specific.
Right.
But when I actually started publishing stuff on Amazon and other places, I used a female pseudonym.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that because you believe that? Because obviously the demographic for most of erotica is women. Is that because you believe that women would rather read a book written by a woman?
It's because most of the erotica that's out there is written by women, and I didn't want to stand out as being different.
Oh, okay, I got you. I mean, I think it would be genius to do that because, yeah, I would agree that I think most women would want to read a book written from a woman's perspective. So I was just curious. Do you still write erotica?
I don't. I stopped writing it. I wrote probably when I was writing on Literotica and stories online. I wrote 4 or 5 novels of what I called erotic mysteries. They were mysteries, murder mysteries that involved explicit content and relationships. And it was a lot of fun to write those. And it taught me a lot about the process of writing. And when I started writing erotica and publishing it for money, I was publishing it on various locations using a couple of different pseudonyms. And I stopped when Amazon made it much more difficult for erotic content to be found on their website. The pornocalypse is what I call it. And I said, at this point, I'm going to have to go ahead and switch over to writing science fiction because I love reading it. So why not go ahead and write it? And that was my kick right there to go ahead and do that.
Sure.
And I already knew that I was going to be laid off. I had the longest layoff notice from NASA ever. They told me that I was going to be laid off in 2014. And then every 3 months, they'd extended another 3 months to almost a year and a half.
Wow.
So I said, if I'm going to make it as a writer, I need to go ahead and establish writing science fiction, or I'm just going to be just crap out of luck.
I'm facing something similar right now. I work for a contractor that works for a government agency here in Chicago, and they're restructuring because we had a new mayor come in. And it's kind of the same thing where they're going to keep some of us, they're going to let some of us go. They're going to try to move some of us around. Who knows? And the first deadline was supposed to be July 1st, and now we're looking at the end of July, and it keeps getting pushed. It's going to get pushed back again. And it's almost like, you know what? Just fucking do it. Just do it. And who knows? Like, this is everyone that's, all my coworkers are like, well, I'll go do this then. You know what I mean? Because we'll get a severance package and everything. Like, oh, this will give me time to spend the summer with my kids, or this will give me time to work on my side business, or this will give me time to write, or whatever, So sometimes those things are blessings in disguise. Talk about the porn apocalypse on Amazon. This story relates back to our mutual friend JC. I had noticed on Amazon that there was a abundance of dinosaur erotica, human dinosaur erotica, and I was fascinated by this because how do you write about a chick fucking a velociraptor? Like, there's no basis of this. You could really do whatever you want to do with it. And there was this picture that went along that I saw on Twitter of a half-naked woman straddling one of those dinosaurs with like the bone plate on its head, like the dome head, almost like a globe. And then in the background there was like a gray alien watching, and it just ignited my imagination. And I posted this thing on Twitter. I'm like, man, we should do this, or we should write. And I ended up writing it, right? And then decided to take it a step further and do a audio version of it that we could release like as a podcast. And JC, of course, sent it to JC because he's JC, and I'm like, hey, what do you think about this? He's like, yeah, I'll do one of the voices. And there was a bunch of people that said they wanted to be involved with it, right? He was the only guy that recorded his dialogue. Nobody else did. Everyone else flaked or was like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore, or I don't know, whatever. And the whole
it's real when you have to start recording it and saying the words out loud.
And everyone fucking not JC. Now, granted, he was one of the aliens. I think his name was Zardoz. So like he didn't have like explicitly graphic content to have to say. But yeah, man, he stepped up when everyone else took a step back. So God bless him. But yeah, I've kind of thought about toe dipping into that just because it's such a wild niche that it seems to be doing a decent amount of business. And I'm not one of those people that chases ideas to make money. You know what I mean? But if I see that there's like a market for something like that I'm also kind of interested in, why not explore it? You know what I mean? I don't know. I downloaded some of those stories off Amazon, like the 99-cent downloads, and they weren't particularly well written or formatted or even like proofread. Like it was just kind of
truth.
You know what I mean? They're just kind of thrown up there, and they had
a lot of people do that.
Yeah, and it seems to work. They're making whatever, So yeah.
So just admit it. Secretly, you're actually Chuck Tingle.
Oh my God! I wish. Are you kidding me? I would love that. I am.
You're banging your butt with your butt. That's what you're doing.
I love Chuck Tingle. I absolutely do. I have a lot of his Choose Your Own Adventure books. I don't have like his really weird esoteric erotica. I think I downloaded once on Kindle and read it and was like, this is whatever it is, and just kind of moved on from it. But I love his level of output. I love his creativity. I love his covers. I dig what that dude's doing. I really fucking do. It's not necessarily for me, but it's like I like that there's like a Roger Corman or a Lloyd Kaufman of self-publishing. Like I really do respect the shit out of that guy. And I wish him nothing but the best. I don't know how much mainstream success he'll ever get, and I'd hate to see it change him as an artist. But man, that's an auteur. 100%. He's got such a specific vibe with his work. I could go on and on about Chuck Tingle, but I will not, because this is about Terry Mixon.
So we're going to expect a Chuck Tingle segment on the other show.
Please, I can't believe no one's done a documentary about him. I bet he's private or something or whatever.
Nobody knows his name.
Yeah.
So who knows who really Chuck Tingle is?
Are you?
I might be.
He might be.
Oh my God, that would be so. If you
He
are,
could be like 10 different people.
I'm just gonna say this: if you are Chuck Tingle, you have seriously inspired me as an artist.
Well, on Chuck Tingle's behalf, thank you. When I was at a writers' conference in Vegas that I go to every year, we were talking with some of the authors were sitting down for dinner and talking, and one of the other people said something, and I went, oh, "You're Chuck Tingle," and the person sitting next to me that didn't even know me smacked me on the shoulder and said, "Stop it."
Well, we found that. I'm going to start doing that, accusing people of being Chuck Tingle.
That's it. That's one of my hobbies. I'll just accuse random people of being Chuck Tingle.
Because they might be. I don't, and then you wouldn't know whether they deny it or they confirm it. You still wouldn't know.
No matter what they say, there's something to play off there.
Perfect. That's perfect.
Yeah. Well, that's all I got. I can't think of going off on a higher note than that.
I am shocked that you guys didn't ask me about the faking of the moon landing thing. How did that not come up?
Yeah, Pat started talking about it, then he stopped. I don't know.
Oh,
I don't know what happened.
I mean, all right, was it faked?
Well, I did work for the department at NASA that faked the moon landing.
Ooh, see? There you go.
That's what I tell people when they ask me what I did with NASA. That's what I tell them exactly.
Have we ever been to the moon, or did we just not? Was that too much of a tight deadline for us?
All I will say for sure here is that you can use telescopes and see the actual lander on the moon. So somehow something got there. But for the people that say that was all special effects, have you seen the special effects from 1969?
Yeah.
Like Star Trek with the green hand holding the Enterprise? That's the level of special effects they had in 1969. That's your answer right there.
Well, it was Kubrick, and he's genius, so I don't know.
I've always maintained that I do not think that the moon landing was faked, because people ask me this from time to time. I mean, the circles that we travel in, it comes up. I think that there was definitely motive. I think they had motive to fake it if they could not have gotten there, right? But I don't necessarily think that it was acted upon. I think we got there on our own. But I think that if something had gone south, and maybe was that option on the table at some point to save face with the Russians? I don't know. But we made it there. But there was definitely motive if we weren't going to make it there. They had reason.
The biggest proof that the moon landing actually happened and wasn't faked is the fact that there were 50,000 people working for NASA and no one talked. Have you ever known any conspiracy with so many people involved where somebody didn't start flapping their gums?
Right.
That is an issue with a lot of conspiracies, is that, listen, there's been a lot that have happened that we know of that were legitimate, right? We've covered it. We talked about MK Ultra, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's been tons of others. They did actually happen. However, the only reason why MK Ultra, so just using it as an example, I think it's because it's my favorite. The only reason it was proven was because documents were found during the purging that was happening during Watergate. But people were talking about it all the way up until that point.
Mm-hmm.
Tons of people were talking about it, but there was no definitive smoking gun of, hey, this happened. So I agree with that. But still, I say the best proof out there that the moon landing didn't happen is the Van Allen belts. So that's my opinion.
We'll never know personally. We'll just have to either trust that it happened or that it didn't.
Or just go. Would you go into space, Terry, if you were given the opportunity?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Really?
You wouldn't be afraid?
Of course I would be afraid. I'm not an idiot. But I would still go. Do you know what Neil Armstrong said what he was thinking about right before they launched him?
What?
He was looking at all of the high-tech systems that were meant to support him and his fellow astronauts all the way to the moon and get them home safely. And he said, every single last one of these things is made by the lowest bidder.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's
But he
yeah.
still
I'd
did it.
imagine that would be horrifying.
I was in the military. At one point, I was brave, and I'm still brave enough to if they wanted to send me into space, I would go. But I would be scared as it happened because space is dangerous. People die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. But you used to jump out of helicopters. Do you still jump out of helicopters just as at
Oh,
in
not
your
even
leisure?
not even close to these years. It was rappelling rather than jumping out of them. So they'd drop a rope down, and then you would go down the rope.
Oh,
And
gotcha.
I've rappelled down the side of buildings. I've rappelled off of cliff sides. I've rappelled out of helicopters, and it's okay. It's something that it's risky, but it's manageable risk because you've got the tools and you understand how they work.
Right. Right. I gotcha. But you wouldn't do it now.
I still would do it now.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
Oh, all right. Well, very, very interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I think I would be afraid of going. I mean, I agree I would do it. I mean, who the hell's going to miss the opportunity to go into space? I would totally do it. But I think I would be very scared until I was back home.
If Jeff Bezos calls me and wants me to fly up into space like William Shatner did, I'll be there for him.
Yeah.
I'm waiting the phone guy. I'm waiting.
I will go. I will do a total colonic cleanse before we go just to make sure that I'm physically ready.
Put on the space diaper and be ready to go.
Let's get it done. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, very cool. Anything else, Pato?
No, I got nothing.
All right then, Terry. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Go ahead and tell people where they can find everything that you do.
You can find me on Amazon. Search for Terry Mixon. I'm the only science fiction author under Terry Mixon. You'll find all the various books that I've written there. You can find me on Facebook. I'm Terry Mixon there as well. And you can hunt for the Dead Robot Society Writing Podcast. And every Saturday we do a live show and talk about whatever creatives want to talk about.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, with that being said, guys, we'll see you back here next Wednesday.